Okay, I've been sat here with Justin Whitaker talking about Buddhism, and we've talked about a few things in other videos, and now I think we come to the area that's Justin's main specialism or expertise that you're writing your PhD about, so hopefully you know something, which is Buddhist ethics. And people often think Buddhist ethics is just the precepts, don't do this, do that, but actually, of course, there's a very significant weight of philosophical reflection in relation to Buddhist ethics, which we can't hope to reflect all of here. But you were going to try and draw out what you thought was perhaps some of the most important aspects.
I think the most important aspects of Buddhist ethics are the focus on sila, this sense of restraint, or I'm actually forgetting the translation of sila. Right?
People sometimes call it virtue, or it's very hard to kind of capture. Because it means in Buddhism something which is like virtue, but it's more practical and it's more to do with self-control.
Yeah, it is much more a preliminary for meditation and for the building toward wisdom. But all three of those, in a way, would go into what we discuss as ethics or virtues, because we talk about in meditation, there are certain meditations on such things as loving kindness, which developing a loving attitude toward other people, we think about as ethics. So when we just look at sila, we're looking at kind of the foundations for building positive, moral traits.
So it's how you kind of act both in terms of physical action, but also in terms of the kind of thoughts you allow yourself to have, or you try and cultivate positive thoughts. And if I have bad thoughts about somebody, and negative thoughts, rather than giving them free rein and thinking about, they are a bad person, and I would like to have my revenge or whatever. I actually try and restrain myself and force myself to sort of reflect differently.
Yeah, really to transform any kind of negative thoughts within yourself into positive ones. And again, that begins with things in sila, such as developing generosity and simply learning to give to others, to break down your own kind of egocentric day-to-day attitudes that you would normally have.
And that starts because we're so often, many of us, are very crudely attached to physical things and to psychological things and to senses of ourselves as great, successful, brilliant, wonderful person or whatever. So the kind of that breaking down that attachment is on many kind of levels, and it's very hard.
It's difficult.
Very difficult to not hold on to things.
Yeah, but I think according to the Buddhist teachings and in practice, it's very, I would say, joyful or a very pleasant thing to do when you contrast that to holding on to selfishness or holding on to negative emotions. There's the teaching that, how does it go, to trying to hurt somebody else with your, like, shouting horrible things at somebody is like, grabbing a burning piece of coal and, thinking you're going to hurt somebody else. You only hurt yourself by holding on to negative emotions and negative thoughts. So,
So there's kind of an analogy between the pleasure that many people might recognize of giving when you give a gift. People know that you may like to receive gifts particularly, but we also might recognize, even the most selfish people can know that actually in giving a gift to someone who appreciates it and seeing the kind of transforming effect it might have on them, there is some kind of pleasure in there, and there's some kind of analogy between doing that physically and giving someone you care about a gift that you know they appreciate and the kind of joy that can bring you, and actually doing that psychologically and giving people good feelings about themselves, saying nice things to people which bring out their positive qualities, actually has even more positive effects on you than you would get from revenging yourself for your enemies.
And I would say more than just pleasure in the action, but kind of a greater sense of well-being, which stays with you over more time.
So it kind of begins to have at least a transformative effect on you as a person.
Indeed.
Like we said about karma, it's about choosing the acts that lead you to become a different person in the future.
Right. And just actions like that on a daily basis, or as often as you can, make your meditative life better. And even if you're not a practitioner of meditation, you can think of those quiet times when your mind does kind of quiet down or become still. It makes those times much more pleasant as well, because
so even your reflective periods become more fruitful or more tolerable. Some people, the reason they can't either do meditation very happily or sit quietly in reflection is their mind is full of kind of unpleasant thoughts, or when they stop entertaining themselves or diverting themselves or distracting themselves, they kind of have all these thoughts which are about fear of death, fear of the people, problems,
anger, childhood issues, all kinds of things that people will hold on to.
So what we think of ethics actually in Buddhism includes something much broader, which has these benefits, like being able to sit with yourself and think more calmly without that fear.
Right, right. And that, again, builds toward the third of the threefold path, the prajna, or wisdom portion. And a big part of that is just being able to sit with and experience directly the three marks of existence that I mentioned in the meditation video. And to be okay with that, to be okay with noticing change and realizing
things won't be impermanent.
So it builds up.
I think that's something I wanted to try and draw out, I think, which is one of the important things you said at the start, which is that if you're not ethically keeping a watch on yourself almost, or kind of having some sense of control, you can't be a fruitful meditator, and you can't be, in the Buddhist sense of how we might conceive of it, wise.
Right.
So you can't just walk around being a selfish, mean, horrible person and expect to be good at meditation or even wise. Actually, we often see them in often Western cultures as quite separate. You can be clever and a mean, horrible person. You can be good at things like meditating, good at skills that require competence, and still be an evil, horrible person. So the idea of it being, and this word gets much abused, but I think it's right in this context, it being much more holistic seems quite at the basis of what Buddhism has to say about ethics and character.
Right, right. And I think in the West especially, and probably in the East as well, people can misuse meditation, develop a great deal of clarity toward harming others, toward killing or something like that.
Well, you see that in cultures that use meditation explicitly, in kind of warrior cultures, being very calm, very calmly, and with great skill and with no emotions, killing people.
Right.
It's not. I suppose I think we're going to see more of this in the West with mindfulness, which has huge potential for benefits for people in mindfulness-based interventions and mental health, but also the idea that you can be a better trader of stock commodities or whatever if you're calmer. Well, but should you be?
Right.
Divorce.
Something that's being discussed a lot now by Buddhists and people trying to push mindfulness in kind of the marketplace, which is the West.
It's just wrenching it out of that Buddhist context to actually do violence to the idea of it. It's kind of problematic.
Right. I think you can wrench it out somewhat, but you need to still talk about a foundation in ethics. It doesn't need to have the kind of metaphysical framework that Buddhism can bring, but you need to talk about ethics. You need to talk about behaviors and treatment of others. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's probably a good place to stop saying that, whatever else Buddhism has to teach us, I think, when we forget about it being about ethics and interpersonal treatment, it stops being recognised as Buddhist at all.
Yeah.